Good afternoon to you. It's 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Mark Krikorian joins us. We'll talk about the border with him at 4:30. And the hearing today in Congress with DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Still no good answers on why the Biden administration's policy is to destroy our country's sovereignty. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Congresswoman, is here at 5 o'clock today as House Republicans are beginning to now say publicly that they'd like an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden to begin. That's the subject of our next conversation as well. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden's impeachment needs to begin immediately. Margot Cleveland thinks that. She's a senior legal correspondent at the Federalist, and she joins us now. Margot, good to have you with us today.
Oh, thanks so much.
Margot, why impeachment now for Joe Biden?
Well, and I would add here, it's not just Joe Biden. I think an inquiry needs to be looking at the Attorney General as well as the FBI director. And the reason now is the evidence is so overwhelming of corruption by the Biden family and Joe Biden, and that it was covered up and the Biden family was protected by the DOJ and the FBI, that the only way to resolve this is for the congressional oversight to take the reins of the investigation.
The Justice Department has been covering up a lot of this evidence by constantly claiming that the pertinent information is the subject of an ongoing investigation. In fact, I suspect, and perhaps you do too, that the reason we got the mess today we did in court with Hunter Biden is because the Justice Department is trying to maintain the illusion that the Biden family investigation remains under investigation. Therefore, they can't share all of the evidence with Congress. Would an impeachment inquiry pierce these claims by the Justice Department? Would it allow us to see this evidence that's being covered up?
It should. And this is where, again, our founders were pretty smart. They have three branches of government, and it would pit the legislative branch against the executive branch in this context, with the executive branch saying, no, we're not showing you that information. But you know what? The Congress can issue subpoenas. They can demand that this information be turned over. That's what they did with the FD 1023, and the House kind of caved a little bit on that when they let the House members see it and not the rest. But if they have to, they can go to the court to issue the subpoenas and move forward that way. I think really what's going to end up happening is at a certain point, the public pressure is going to force the Democrats to come out and pressure Biden, the Attorney General, and others to come clean. I think that is going to be the solution, and it might be that the impeachment inquiry starts that.
In order for public pressure to rise, public knowledge has to rise about what's happening with Joe Biden. And today is one of those days where I think the press is kind of being forced into explaining what is happening with the Biden family. Everybody expected that this would be kind of a simple court case resolved in terms of a plea deal, and then Hunter Biden would walk out a free man from this courtroom today. That's not what happened, and I've noticed that places like the New York Times and CNN are scrambling to catch their audiences up with what's happening with the Biden family. Do you think public knowledge about this is going to go up meaningfully today?
I do. I think you're absolutely right that the elite media who have been covering for the Bidens as much, if probably as much as the DOJ, has been forced to cover it because of what happened in court today. I would go further, though, and say they're not just trying to catch up their audiences with this. They're trying to catch up themselves. They have ignored all of the evidence that has been out there. And because of that, many of those reporting on the Hunter Biden family scandal really don't know the evidence that's out there.
Yes.
So they're having to get up to speed on it as well.
You know, some evidence to your point today. I noticed this, and Joe Simonson over at the Free Beacon just tweeted it a short while ago. On the New York Times live blog today of the Hunter Biden case, Michael Schmidt, one of their lead political reporters, posted the following item today. He says, quote, "As someone who came a bit late to the Hunter Biden story, I have learned that just when you think it's over, it becomes all the more tangled." It's amazing, isn't it, Margot? You have a New York Times reporter openly admitting he hasn't really been paying that much attention to the biggest scandal of our era.
Oh, absolutely. He doesn't know what's going on. His audience then obviously doesn't know what's going on. And as they are forced to cover it, what is going to happen is the public's going to be seeking out more knowledge, and then they're going to actually find the reporters who have been covering the details, finding what the House and the Senate have been releasing and the information, and that's where the public tide is going to turn. When they realize how overwhelming this evidence is, that while Vice President Joe Biden worked with his son to arrange for cash money to be transferred in exchange for something Joe Biden bragged about on tape, the firing of the prosecutor in Ukraine.
We're expecting testimony beginning next week from Hunter Biden's former business partner, Devin Archer. The Devin Archer is set to speak to Republican lawmakers behind closed doors Monday. Will that testimony be a turning point, do you think?
I don't, because I'm frankly a little bit suspicious of what his testimony is going to be. I don't think he has gotten to the point yet where he's willing to throw his friend and his friend's longtime friend's family under the bus. Uh-huh. So I have a feeling we're getting played a little bit by this, that we're going to have some testimony that's helpful, and yet many more caveats of, well, he didn't say anything on the phone, or he didn't know what was going on. But if he testifies just on that one point, that Hunter Biden said, Joe, they need your, Dad, they need your help, even if on the phone Joe Biden said nothing, I think that will be significant and maybe give a little bit more press.
Just so people understand, the testimony that Devin Archer is expected to give, according to the New York Post, is that Joe Biden joined Hunter on phone calls, on basically joined him over speakerphone at least 24 times with foreign business partners, is described as something of a party trick that Hunter would use in order to convince foreign business associates to give the Biden family tremendous amounts of money.
Right, and this is where I was, I guess, trying to make 2 points, but obviously not very clearly. One is that I'm understanding that Devin Archer is also supposedly going to testify that President Biden at the time did not know he was on speakerphone. But one of the other things that he was supposedly testifying is that when Hunter introduced Dad to the two Burisma reps in one phone call, at least Hunter said, they need your help or they need your assistance. So I don't care if in the other 23 calls nobody knew, or President Biden didn't know he was on speakerphone.
Yes.
That one call is enough, because we know he threatened to withhold the millions, billions from Ukraine unless the prosecutor was fired.
Yep.
So to me, that is more than enough.
And Devin Archer is not the only former Hunter Biden business associate to speak on the record. Tony Bobulinski, of course, did this years ago, and I want to remind people of what he said. Remember, this is just hours before a major presidential debate. Tony Bobulinski steps up to a microphone, reads a prepared statement. In it, he says this.
On numerous occasions, it was made clear to me that Joe Biden's involvement was not to be mentioned in writing, but only face-to-face. In fact, I was advised by Gillier and Walker that Hunter and Jim Biden were paranoid about keeping Joe Biden's involvement secret.
That seems like a big deal. Do you think we'll ever hear from Tony Bobulinski before a congressional committee?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It wouldn't surprise me if they've already interviewed him privately, but if not, they will soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from the confidential human source. I'm not sure if you noted it, but on Twitter recently I just broke news that a source familiar with the congressional investigations has confirmed that they do know the identity of the confidential human source from the 1023. So they have a lot of information, and that's part of the reason I think we need the impeachment inquiry. It has been unfortunately haphazard, not because they're not trying, but we have the Oversight Committee, we have the Judiciary Committee, we have the Subcommittee on Weaponization, we have Senator Grassley and Johnson working with some whistleblowers in the Senate. We need this all in one place with all the people who know this to be touching base, checking, connecting the dots to find out what evidence we have, and not just about Joe Biden, but also about what happened in the Department of Justice, what happened with the FBI, what happened with the Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office, California U.S. Attorney's Office, and the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. All of that should be part of an impeachment inquiry.
You just said, I missed this news from you until you just shared it with us. You said that congressional investigators do know the identity of the confidential human source who laid out the Biden bribery allegations in Ukraine?
Yes, they do, and I just broke that about an hour ago.
Okay, and do they have any sense of this person's credibility? Did they say anything about that?
I have not gotten that from my source, but if you recall, we've already have that this person was a highly credible, confidential human source, and that he dates back to the Obama administration. And you might know from the 1023 that Grassley released, it references how they came across this confidential human source, which is they were searching for other information, and he had previously, in other reporting, made reference to the Bidens and it sounds like some bribery scandals.
Yes.
So it wasn't a matter of this confidential human source came forward before the election. It looks like they reached out to him when they were tracking down information, and they interviewed him to get more details.
That's important. So the FBI sought his testimony rather than the other way around. So, and you reported earlier this week that, in fact, in all of the claims that he made, that the travel dates that he says he was on all lined up with an FBI analysis. In other words, the FBI thought his claims inside of this bribery allegation were very credible as well.
Absolutely, and they told that to Delaware, according to my source. But I would add there were two more pieces of corroboration, that the handler of the confidential human source confirmed that the confidential human source had contemporaneously said he was going to be meeting with the Burisma owner, the founder of Burisma. So before one of these meetings, and it was either 2015 or 2016 or 2019, there were I can't remember which of the meetings it was, but before one of these meetings, the confidential human source told his handlers he was going to go meet with the owner of Burisma, which, again, is corroboration. And then we had that there was some preliminary open source research done that showed that Burisma had actually bought or entered into an agreement with a publicly traded oil and gas entity from Canada. So, again, this confirms what at least the Burisma exec was starting to talk about what their plan was.
Yeah.
So we have, and not just that they confirmed this, they told this to the Delaware folks, which is why I say this impeachment investigation is much beyond President Biden. We need to know why that was not followed up on. That was already preliminarily investigated.
Yes.
It was sent to Delaware for more.
Yeah, and an impeachment proceeding would force the media to have to share with its audience at least some of the details about why this impeachment exists at all, and that would be important for public knowledge.
I think it would definitely be important for public knowledge, and it would also be important, again, to connect the dots so that they can get all the people together who have this information. And I'm all for people who have contrary information. They have, I think it was Les Parnas. I'm not sure. I can't, remember the pronunciation of the name.
Yes.
Who's coming out saying, "Oh, there's nothing there." You know what? Fine. I want to hear all of this. I want to know the truth. And apparently, we can't trust the DOJ to do it. So let's have the impeachment inquiry. It doesn't mean there's going to be an impeachment, but this is the oversight. This is why the Founding Fathers gave the legislative branch the ability to do these impeachment inquiries.
And finally, Margot Cleveland, not to get too far ahead of your reporting here, but do you know the source of the confidential human source, or do you expect his name will be public imminently?
I do not know his name, and I do not expect it to be known imminently. I think that they're probably going to try to protect him for as long as possible. I do think eventually it will come out.
Sure seems like it. A lot of people interested in this, despite the media's best effort. Thank you very much, Margot Cleveland at the Federalist, for always being on top of this story. Really appreciate your analysis today. Chaos today in the United States Senate as Mitch McConnell was doing a press briefing, and he began to address reporters, but he froze up and appeared to have some sort of medical emergency in the middle of his remarks. Take a listen to what it sounded like. This video is a good angle. You can hear some good, and that's not useful on radio, but it's a good angle in the sense that the audio is rich. You can hear the microphone action here as Mitch McConnell just stops speaking and stares vacantly at the press.
Bipartisan cooperation and a string of
you see some senators, John Thune, John Barrasso behind him. Everyone starts to shift around. What is happening with Mitch McConnell? Barrasso stepping up to his arm. Barrasso's a physician.
Okay, Mitch? Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to you?
That's Barrasso saying, "Are you okay, Mitch? Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to say to the press?
Say, or should we just go back to your office?
Do you want to go back to your office?
Say anything else to the press? Go back.
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
Let's go back. Let's go back," he says. So Barrasso leads him away. It was just a few minutes later. You did have Mitch McConnell appear back at the lectern for a moment, and he was asked about this. CNN's Manu Raju asked him what happened. Can you tell us what happened at the outset here? McConnell said, "I'm fine." He was a little curt.
You addressed what happened here at the start of the press conference, and it was related to your injury from earlier this year where you suffered a concussion. Is that?
No, I'm fine.
You're fine. You're fully able to
Yeah.
do your job.
Mr. Lear, can I just...
He just said, "I'm fine." And that was it. The press moved on. Nobody asking any more obvious questions here. What is going on? He did trip and fall inside of a Washington hotel earlier this year, sustained a concussion. He was out for some time. Not sure what we're looking at other than an old man who just went vacant for a time today. We'll give you updates as we get them. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene joins us at the top of the hour. We'll find out what is happening behind the scenes as House Republicans begin seriously discussing the impeachment of the President of the United States, led apparently by the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene with the details ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Today in the House Judiciary Committee, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas made another appearance, and while he was there, was questioned by the illustrious Congresswoman from Texas, Sheila Jackson Lee.
So would you say, having been asked this over and over again, that the United States, the President of the United States, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and all of the hardworking men and women at the border have operational control or have a form of presence, that they are aware of what's going on in the border and that they're working to secure the border every single day?
As we define that term, Congresswoman, we do.
Wow, that's a lot of euphemisms for our borders collapsing. Let's go to our next guest, Mark Krikorian. He's the Executive Director of the Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins us now. Mark, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
I like it. I like how Democrats can't even pretend anymore that the point is to secure the border. You hear all that throat clearing from Sheila Jackson Lee?
Oh my God! I mean, both Secretary Mayorkas and the Democrats all trying to protect him were just slithering around like it was just unbelievable.
Yes, and it's not at this point, as far as the Biden administration is concerned, it's not a crisis. The only crisis is the public relations crisis. Beyond that, this all seems to be by design, Mark Krikorian.
Well, it certainly seems to be. I mean, and even if it's not by design, in other words, I don't think that they planned for this to happen. but they don't want to do anything that actually would stop it, because it's not so much that they've sort of have this strategy of importing voters. I just don't think that's the case. I think the issue here is they do not believe the American people have the right to say no to anybody who comes to the border with any kind of vaguely plausible story. And so they just think that it's the only acceptable thing to do is to let them all in.
But why? They think, but is the concept that if we turn them away, that we would seem inhuman and it would be a bad political talking point for us? Is that the concept?
Well, I don't think it's political. In other words, I think they just think, it would be inhumane. It's a violation of their human rights to say that they're not allowed to move to the United States. And even to say you really need to apply for asylum in Mexico. Mexico is the third country in the world, third largest number of asylum applications in the world after United States and Germany. And it has a whole asylum system. Mexico is a big country. There are some places that are unsafe. There are other places that are safe. And yet the Democrats seem to be operating on the assumption that even having to stay in Mexico is a kind of death sentence. It's absurd, frankly. It's an insult to Mexico, but it's an insult to American law too.
But in the process, I'll let Matt Gaetz vocalize it here. This is Gaetz saying to Mayorkas today, all you're doing is enriching the cartels.
The Mexican government is captive to the cartels. They are doing the bidding of the cartels, and based on your response today, so are you.
And so how would it be humane to allow the cartels to engage in rampant human sex and drug trafficking?
Good question. Ask them. I mean, they just, the cartels see the Biden rhetoric and the Biden policy. They literally call it la invitación, the invitation to cross the border. The cartels are, some of them, there's a guy, Jason Jones, law enforcement guy in Texas. He says that some of these cartels are now making more money from charging tolls and extortion and what have you on illegal immigration than they are from drugs. Mm-hmm. And this isn't because of global warming or whatever it is. There's all kinds of problems in Latin America and abroad. People are coming from Central Asia and Africa now, too. The reason is the odds of their getting in and being let go are dramatically higher under Biden, and so they're operating rationally. And they're coming here, and the cartels are taking advantage of this and doing the land office business.
Now, one of the ways that people are coming into the country now is not just illegal entry, but they're using this app that the Department of Homeland Security is providing to allow people to be essentially trafficked into the country by the United States government. It seems to me that if House Republicans wanted to target anything for defunding, it should be this app, because it's allowing foreign nationals to pour into our country basically legally.
Yeah, this app, it's called CBP One. They spell out the word one, CBP, Customs and Border Protection. You can download it on Google Play or Apple, whatever it is.
The App Store.
The Apple thing is called. It's right there. I've downloaded it just to see what it looks like. And initially, it was developed during COVID under the Trump administration to facilitate normal, like, bus traffic or importers. In other words, it was designed to sort of smooth out the flow of people, of business at the border. It made sense. It's a good idea. This administration is using it as a way for prospective illegal immigrants to schedule their illegal immigration into the United States, like reserving a table at a restaurant.
Yes.
And there's a political goal here so that they can say, look, the number of people the Border Patrol are arresting is down. And that's true. At least it was in June compared to the month before. But the number of people coming through the ports of entry and illegally being let go is going way up.
Yep.
So the illegal aliens aren't jumping the border, breaking the law. It's the Biden administration that's breaking the law for them instead.
Yeah, it's good to compare it to restaurant reservations. It's like open table, except it's open border.
Yes,
that's what they're doing.
Exactly.
So Matt Gaetz actually did have another line here with Mayorkas on this app, and he talked about the fact that these illegals are not being properly vetted. Take a listen to this.
You've sent the message to the cartels, and then you've taken this app and you've digitized illegal immigration and you've scaled it to the moon. Like, this app that you've got everybody downloading as like the Disney Fast Pass into the country, never to be subject to actual removal, just removal proceedings, as you call them, that app doesn't do any search of their criminal history in their home country, does it?
Congressman, I disagree with everything you have said.
Well, I'm sure, but just to answer the question, does the app that you are out there promoting do any search of people's criminal history in their home country?
Congressman, Customs and Border Protection screens and vets individuals whom they encounter.
Your
thoroughly.
app, it either has the functionality to test their criminal history in their home country or it doesn't. By the way, if it did, you'd have already told me. It doesn't.
How successful is the Biden administration at, quote, screening and vetting the people who are pouring into our country?
You know, not really. I mean, they're vetting them to some degree. You run their names through, like Interpol databases, that sort of stuff. They do some basic vetting. I mean, the people are officers and agents at the border. They're trying to do their jobs. But what kind of vetting can you do about a person's background in their home country? If you're coming from Haiti, where there really isn't much of a government anyway, how are you going to check somebody's criminal record? Or say Venezuela, which is run by communist dictators. They're not going to give us information about what this person's background is.
So if you're coming from a failed country, it's not going to work.
The places where the countries where law enforcement and the systems are functional and can give you this kind of information are the kind of places that don't send a lot of immigrants anyway.
Sure,
obviously.
You're not fleeing from functional societies. Okay, so
right, of course.
So there was also this: how many people are actually removed as a result of these, quote, removal proceedings? Congressman Jim Jordan asked Alejandro Mayorkas about this.
How many of that 2-point-something million, over 2 million, how many have went through the adjudication process and actually been removed?
Mr. Chairman.
And you're telling the Judiciary Committee today you don't know what that number is?
Mr. Chairman, what I am sharing with you is that we will provide you with whatever data you request.
No, that's not where I want to go right, but it's a simple. We've had kind of two simple questions that you didn't give an answer to, and I just want to know, give you a second chance here if you'll do it. What is that number out of that 2-point-something universe of inadmissible aliens encountered on our southern border who've come into the country, been released into the country? How many have went through the adjudication process and then been removed?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be pleased to provide you with that.
Can you guess?
Mr. Chairman, it is.
Can you give an estimate?
Mr. Chairman, I will not.
Mark Krikorian, why is the Secretary being evasive on that answer?
Well, because the answer is pretty close to zero. That's why. The fact is, this administration does deport some people, and he boasts about deporting criminal aliens, except that not only have overall deportations collapsed under this administration, even the deportations of criminals have declined dramatically under this administration. And the question Chairman Jordan was asking was, of the people that they've let in at the border and let go, how many of them have been, removed after they finish their cases? Now, most of them haven't even gone through the asylum process yet, but some of them have. And if there's any of them who have gone through the asylum process, been turned down, who have actually been taken into custody and thrown out of the country, I'd be surprised if the number's even one. Mm-hmm. It might be one, it might be two, but it's not much more than that, and Secretary knows that perfectly well. That's why he wouldn't answer the question.
Also, some of the people who are quite obviously the ones who wouldn't qualify for an asylum claim of any kind are the smugglers themselves. There have been some 14,000 smugglers, apparently, according to the Biden administration, that they've arrested. And Alejandro Mayorkas couldn't even answer today when Jim Jordan asked him what happened to those 14,000 smugglers. So it doesn't seem to me, Mark Krikorian, that there's any meaningful sense of urgency to deal with criminals in a timely manner.
No urgency at all. I mean, and this is, this comes from the top. Remember, it was Joe Biden, when he was a candidate, said, only felons will be deported, and he didn't consider drunk drivers to be felons or something like that. So the broad message is that unless you actually are caught in the process of raping a little girl or blowing somebody's head off, then you're pretty much okay to stay.
Despicable. Also, can you talk a little bit about the nature of the state of the drug crisis right now as it relates to our border? How bad are things getting?
Well, they're bad, and look, even if we had a sensible policy on border enforcement, drugs are going to get through. The issue here is that because the Border Patrol and, generally speaking, the DHS at the border is overwhelmed, the cartels have taken advantage of that opportunity to move even more poison through the border, whether it's ports of entry or between the ports of entry. I've talked to a rancher who in South Texas who said that cartels sort of planted themselves on his side of the border in his ranch at one point, and were moving people through. And the reason they were able to do that is because the Border Patrol was all focused on some big group of illegal immigrants who'd come across, and they had to process them and go and buy them diapers and take the women to the emergency room so they could deliver their babies.
Yes.
They were totally overwhelmed, and the cartels have taken advantage of that opportunity.
And the cartels, as I understand, have been sourcing all of the chemicals they use to put into fentanyl from China. If China snapped its fingers and said it wanted to stop the fentanyl crisis in the United States today, could they?
Probably. I mean, look, other places would pop up to create these the predecessor chemicals.
Yes.
But why would China do that? You know what I mean? In other words, it's not like the government is actively engaging in subverting our society, at least probably not, but they're happy to see it happen. In fact, specifically China doesn't mind because they see this as payback for the opium wars,
right,
which we had nothing to do with, obviously, but they still see that as the kind of revenge for what the British and the French did in the Opium War. So, no, they're not going to shut this down.
I do think that they are actively subverting our society in a number of ways, whether it's fentanyl or TikTok. But the other piece of this is the Biden administration is just not placing the meaningful pressure on China that would be required in order to stop that.
Yeah, or pressure on Mexico to be serious about immigration, or pressure on anybody else. I mean, look, does anyone fear Joe Biden? Nope. I mean, think about it. Now, obviously you want to work with foreign governments. It's not all just, waving the big stick, but you have to have the big stick in order to speak softly. If you speak softly and have no stick, then nobody cares what you say.
No.
I mean, look, this administration is a laughing stock in the world, regardless of what the policy is. And so no one's going to pay any attention to any requests or threats or anything they make because they're not afraid of them.
Mark Krikorian, you're the executive director at the Center for Immigration Studies. Thank you, sir, as always. Good to talk to you today.
And look, we thank everyone for coming out here. The importance of climate is shown on a 90-degree day. We all want to be here to highlight the ERA.
There's Chuck Schumer, passing along yet another lie about the state of our climate in order to justify government control over your life. They have an unquenchable appetite for making you miserable. That is the policy of the left, and Chuck Schumer's out there. Remember when, when it snows a lot and then some conservative says, boy, could sure use some of that global warming right about now, right? You know that old joke? It's an old standby. Nobody really laughs at it anymore. But still, you say it. I wish we had some of that global warming. And then the left gets angry, as they so often do. And they say something like, weather is not climate. That's what they'll say. It's weather, not climate. Jerk. And then Chuck Schumer stands out there today and says, well, it's 90 degrees, therefore climate change? I'm sorry. I thought you told me weather wasn't climate. No, idiot. There are no rules. The only rule is the left wins. That's the rule. So Chuck Schumer, and they're all over this. And if you talk to anybody who knows anything about anything with regards to weather patterns and temperatures, the left has been conflating surface and air temperatures a lot lately in order to try and conceal what's really going on. So if they're using deception, chances are they're not telling you the truth. Actually, anytime you detect deception, that's a good sign they're not telling you the truth. Also, as our buddy Steve Malloy points out this week in reaction to Hillary Clinton's stupid tweet on this subject, she tweeted out because it's been hot out, in July. It's been hot. Can you believe it? It's been hot in late July. Hillary Clinton wrote, hot enough for you? Thank a MAGA Republican, or better yet, vote them out of office. Steve Malloy points out the following. She says, He says EPA admits that heat waves have dramatically declined since the 1930s. June was not the hottest month on the satellite record. That was June of 1998. That was a long time ago. Phoenix has not broken any temperature records from weather alone. And July 4th was not the hottest day in 100,000 years, despite what the left has been claiming. 100,000 years? They really said that? How do they even measure that? We've been keeping records. You know, they erase all the other records, and then they make up these ones. It's the left for you. Coming up, aliens exist, apparently, and the U.S. government has captured their bodies. The testimony, the shocking testimony on extraterrestrials today, and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is just minutes away on the subject of Joe Biden's impeachment. Don't miss it.